techniques in orbit.
Did you tell NASA you were doing that?
Well, then I eventually told my colleagues what I was doing, and let me tell you, there was no love lost, and that was the end of my ideas.
Walt's got a far better history than I do, but let me tell you, one of the first things that I encountered going to pilot training was the great suspicion pilots had of flight surgeons.
Right.
Because a flight surgeon can ground you with a stroke of a pen. And that is an incentive not to tell them anything. Never tell them anything. And it's amazing how fast that permeates the new pilots.
Really? Well, I have to tell you, I'll never forget this flight surgeon. Well, when I was in the reserves at Los Alamitos, you have to take a flight physical once a year in those days. It depends on what your rating is and all that stuff is today. But I had to take a flight physical once a year. And there was several of them who had taken the flight physical with this new flight surgeon, and we've been kind of warned. I have the flattest feet in the world, and maybe even concave down the convex. And I remember the first time I went into this flight surgeon, and I can remember squeezing the floor so hard with my toes and my heels, so they had a little bit of an arch. And I catch this flight surgeon kind of looking out of the corner of his eyes like this, you know, to see if he'd catch it. Because I don't know if do they feel particularly good because they could ground somebody, you know? Anyhow, you get grounded in those days. And I thought, well, I'm an Navy. I remember when I had to walk a long way with that. Anyhow, that attitude has continued through, and I'll never forget, just before the flight, I had something that bothered me in the shoulder, and I was at dinner with a guy, a doctor in Houston, and I can remember, he says, well, come in and see me. And I never ever, to this day, I've never reported to NASA that we took the x-rays. He sent it to 3 people around the country to see what they were. And I was thinking, well, maybe it's cancer, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let them know. I'm going to get that flight in before they find out. So there is that kind of a natural distrust. To give you the end of the story about this flight surgeon, I don't remember his name, didn't know a thing, but and that was back in 1962 or 3, I don't remember which flight physical it was. About 3 years ago, I get an email from a guy, and he didn't know it. He sent a letter, an old-fashioned letter. He said, found my address someplace. He sent me a letter, and he says, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and he says, I'm the one that signed your physical that allowed you to become an astronaut. This is the guy that was watching the feed. And he says, I'm coming to town, I'm hoping we get together. He was taking credit for me becoming an astronaut because he had given me enough on the physical before I came down here. And he's the guy that we were scared to death of because he was trying to ground you for flat feet. He gave a surprise ending. So.
But I'll tell you, and one thing that reinforced that barrier was that, real or not, everyone you talked to had a horror story.
Yeah.
Related to what flight surgeons had done to them, or their friend, or a friend of a friend, and it perpetuates itself. Now I understand the relationships between the astronaut office and the medical people at Houston are a little bit better than they were nowadays. But boy, believe me, you just didn't talk about it. What's that?
Not to hear the flight surgeons talk about it.
I think it is a lot more open now, and part of it is because they got a much more diverse population of people that's in there. There's still, back in my day it was 100% aviators. Today it was 20 to 25% of them are aviators that are down there. So you've got most of that population is not all worried about getting grounded, from these things. And NASA, in all honesty, I have to say, I think they did a hell of a job at keeping us flying. I really do.
Yeah.
But I will say I was sure sorry I didn't get to do my biofeedback experiment because I was sick to death for 4 days.
Half the guys are.
This whole business, though, on the positive side of space adaptation is fascinating. I've spent a fair amount of time looking at it myself. And just to give you one example, it's Not everybody experiences it, but most people begin to lose bone mineral mass when you become weightless. For some people, it's quite serious, and it goes at a pretty high rate. Others, it doesn't seem to happen at all. And I think we finally got an exercise machine up there on the space station. I talked to some people in Houston when I was down there for my last physical. Saw it demonstrated, and they're pretty optimistic. They've had some people come back without any significant.
Zero change.
So we probably are solving that problem through exercise. There may be some pharmaceutical solutions as well, but exercise is obviously preferred. But the reason I bring this up is that when the people come back, they gradually restore that bone mineral mass. And the NIH, I've had some interactions with the NIH through the years, and they're fascinated by this because that makes it different than the normal aging process of losing bone mineral mass. And they want very much to know, why did we recover our bone mineral mass when an older person doesn't? We don't know the answer to that question yet, but boy, I'll tell you, if we find that out, it can be very, very important as a prophylactic treatment for osteoporosis.
That is also one of the beauties of studying aerospace physiology in general. In normal anatomy and physiology, you learn about normal people in a normal environment. In medicine, you learn about sick people or diseased people in a normal environment. So you're going along some spectrum between normal and disease. In aerospace physiology and medicine, you're looking at relatively normal people you choose in a very abnormal environment, and that's a completely different dimension of understanding how the human body works and responds to different situations. And so to me, that adds a depth of understanding that we will gradually accumulate with experience in spaceflight as well as in clinical medicine and in experimental physiology and the like. So I think it's a very important addition to understanding things that will help people here on Earth with medicine. And that's past the spin-offs that you hear about that came out of the space program. It's just a better understanding of who we are as individuals in a species and how we respond.
You know they're doing a lifelong study on all of this.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's a very good
I'm not sure.
I think I would have looked at other things.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just got my last episode last week.
We've got about 20 more minutes. I want to give students especially a chance to ask some questions. So, who's got a question for you? Please.
So, say for instance, given your knowledge that you have right now, if you were able to turn back time to like one of us here and live in the modern day, would you choose to do this all over again?
I would.
That's a question.
No-brainer.
Just making sure, because you know I was speaking to Dan here, and I'm just going through a decision process per se. And
No question about it. In fact, the older I get and the more times change, the more I realize how fortunate I was just to have lived when I did.
Yeah.
My background and what I did probably wouldn't get that job that I got back in 1960.
But you know, again, there were some people, not in my group, but in the next group of scientists, astronauts, engineer astronauts that were selected. A couple people just decided it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
One did it in pilot training, and another one after he got through pilot training, and came to Houston. So, you know, people have to, you really have to evaluate your own motivations and what you want to do, and it can happen. But boy, I'll tell you, for me, it was a series of accidental milestones that occurred, and that ended up in the astronaut program. I think the one thing that made the difference was that it was education. You were broad enough to take advantage of these accidental milestones when they occurred. You with your education, and you could jump in and do the next thing. The next career came along and you were prepared to take that one on.
And when you talk about education, you know something? I can't recall any more educational period in my life than the time I spent at NASA.
That's right.
And something I forgot to say earlier when we were talking about flying, I wanted to mention to you, those of you that are here learning to fly, what kind of time do you have when you get finished?
Just over 200 hours.
Just over 200 hours.
Very similar to military.
I want to encourage you, even if you get your 200 hours, even if you get a commercial pilot's